smells it before she sees it. Her ozone, sweet decay, attack by Plasma fire tears across the amber sky. Sleek alien ships descend.
They're here! Run!
Get inside, quickly!
They are coming! Run! Run faster!
Look out! The ship is right above us!
Seeds. And when the dust settles, she finds him, Korvax, a four-armed alien pirate, hiding in her greenhouse, his crew retreating without him. He's the enemy. She should turn him in. Instead, she makes a choice that will change everything. She looks into his alien eyes and says the words that seal both their fates. Come on. The smell hit Minji first burnt ozone and something sweetly organic, like overripe fruit left in summer heat. She wrinkled her nose, fingers still wrapped around the molecular splicer. She'd been calibrating when the colony's emergency sirens started their three-tone wail. Outside the greenhouse's polymer dome, plasma fire streaked orange against Kepler 442b's perpetual amber sky. Well, that's not standard procedure, she muttered, setting down the splicer with a steadiness that surprised her. Her hands only started shaking after. The colony knew Hadong, population 847, established 2187, wasn't supposed to be interesting enough to raid. They grew engineered crops that could survive in 2G gravity and sold them to freight haulers who rarely stayed longer than it took to load cargo. No military installation, no rare minerals, just dirt, seeds, and people who like being far away from Earth's bureaucracy. Minji moved toward the greenhouse exit, then stopped. Through the transparent aluminum panels, she could see them now. Ships. Not the blocky freight vessels she'd grown used to, but something sleeker, with hulls that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid. They moved wrong too sideways when they should bank. Hovering without visible thrust on her unit crackled. Commercial district. Repeat. Hostiles in commercial. Static consumed the rest. Minji's greenhouse sat on the colony's eastern edge, backed against the ridge where they dug storm shelters into the red clay. She could run there. Should run there. That's what the emergency protocol said. Get to shelter. Wait for the defense grid to activate. Hope the distress beacon reached someone who cared. Instead, she grabbed her tool belt. Stupid, probably. But the splicer was expensive, and she'd just gotten it calibrated right. The greenhouse door hissed open. Kepler 442b's atmosphere tasted metallic, thicker than Earth's, heavy with iron oxide dust that got into everything. The increased gravity pulled at her shoulders as she jogged toward the storage facility where they kept the heavy equipment. Not toward safety. Toward the colony center. She wasn't brave. Minji knew this about herself. She'd come to Kepler 442b because the agricultural corps offered to clear her student debt, not because she dreamed of frontier adventure. She liked plants because they didn't argue back. She lived alone because relationships required vulnerability she'd never quite managed. But she was also stubborn. And those ships were probably in her workspace right now, tracking their dirty whatever they were across her clean floors. The storage facility was deserted. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red. Minji's footsteps echoed off metal walls as she passed shelves of spare parts, emergency rations, and air. The excavator drones they used for expanding the irrigation system. Each one about the size of a small car, with tungsten carbide drill bits designed to chew through Kepler 442b's iron-heavy bedrock. She'd helped program them last month, and complained about how twitchy the proximity sensors were. How they'd stop working if you so much as looked at them wrong. Maybe. Twitchy sensors had their uses. The control tablet woke at her touch. Minji's fingers flew across the interface. Muscle memory from hundreds of boring calibration sessions. She bypassed the safety protocols, the ones that prevented the drones from activating near biological signatures, and set them to autonomous excavation mode. Then she programmed a simple instruction. Proceed to the commercial district. Begin digging Operation Dot. It was possibly the dumbest act of rebellion in human history. Dot the drones were to life. Their electric motors humming in a rising pitch. 6 of them, each weighing about 2 tons, rolled toward the facility's delivery doors on their treads. Minji hit the door release and stepped back. Go. Make some noise, she whispered. Then she did run for the shelters. Alien who would later introduce himself as Korvax, though his actual name involved harmonics. Human vocal cords couldn't produce was having what his crewmates would diplomatically call a bad rotation. The raid on the human colony had been Shrist's idea. Shrist, who claimed to have perfect intelligence about human defenses, who insisted these frontier settlements were easy pickings, like harvesting zill fruit from sedated branches, he'd said. Shrist, who was currently on their ship nursing a broken sensory cluster after something exploded in what was supposed to be an undefended warehouse. Korva XX, crouched behind what the humans called a community bulletin board, his forearms tucked close to his thorax. His species, the Velkith, had been raiding less developed worlds for 3 generations. They were good at it, efficient. They understood risk. Assessment. This felt less like risk and more like suicide. Another explosion rocked the settlement. Korvax's translator implant struggled with the human warning labels, but he was pretty sure the building had been marked fertilizer storage. Who defended themselves with fertilizer? Korvax. His cum chittered. Movement, Section 3. Looks like the transmission cut off. Through his primary eyes, Korvax saw why. One of their crewmates, young Teak, barely past his 3rd molt, was running from what appeared to be a mining machine. A very angry mining machine that had somehow decided Tick was bedrock in need of excavating. This wasn't in the intelligence briefing. Korvax made a decision. Not a good decision, but a living one. He activated his personal shield and ran toward the nearest structure, something the translated sign identified Agricultural Research Station. The door was unlocked. Humans and their trusting natures. Inside. It was peaceful, quiet. The air smelled of growing things and humidity. Rows of plants stretched under full-spectrum lights. Korvax's sensory pits detected elevated carbon dioxide levels, optimal for photosynthesis. Someone had been working here recently. He moved deeper into the building, away from the chaos outside. His shield flickered, taking damage from something. He checked the readout. Atmospheric particulates? That was impossible, unless the humans had somehow weaponized their dust. A sound. Korvax spun, all 4 arms reaching for weapons he'd left on the ship. Because this was supposed to be easy. A human stood at the far end of the aisle. Female, if he remembered the briefing correctly. Small by human standards. Dark hair pulled back from her face. Wearing work clothes covered in dirt. She held something, a tool of some kind, pointed at him with shaking hands. They stared at each other. The human said. Then, more firmly, you need to leave. Korvax's translator turned her sounds into meaning. Simple language. Direct. His training said to neutralize threats immediately. His survival instinct said this human had survived longer in this colony than most of his crew had survived in the raid. I am not currently able to leave, he said carefully, gesturing toward the door where something large and mechanical was making grinding sounds. The situation outside is complicated. Yeah, the human said. Because you're attacking us. That was the plan, yes. Korvax tilted his head in what he hoped was a non-threatening posture. Humans were bilateral, so symmetry was important to them. The plan is going poorly. The human's weapon, he could see now it was some kind of molecular tool, not designed for combat, lowered slightly. You speak English. My implant translates. Your languages vary. He searched for the word. Imprecise. Many words for the same concept. It's confusing. Tell me about it. I failed my Mandarin requirement twice. The human took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it. Is your crew going to stop blowing things up? Probably not voluntarily. That's honest. Lying would be inefficient. You've clearly prepared defenses we didn't anticipate. The human made a sound laughter, his database supplied. Defenses? Those are excavator drones. I just set them loose because I was pissed off. Kovacs processed this. You're telling me we're being defeated by construction equipment? Technically agricultural equipment. But yeah, she smiled, showing her flat teeth. Humans smiled when they found things amusing. You picked the wrong settlement to raid. Outside more explosions. Korvax's com was full of distress signals now. The raid was collapsing. They'd lost 3 crew members and gained exactly nothing except embarrassment. My name is Minji, the human said suddenly. If you're going to hide in my greenhouse, we should at least be introduced. Korvax. He tried pronouncing it the way humans would hear it. I apologize for the inconvenience of invading your... That's probably the weirdest apology I've ever gotten. Minji set her tool down on a workbench but kept herself between it and Korvax. Smart. So what now? Do we just wait until your friends leave? They're crewmates, not friends. And yes, that seems advisable. He paused. Unless you plan to weaponize your plants as well. Don't give me ideas. They stood in awkward silence. Korvax studied the plants around them. Genetic modifications, obvious even to his non-botanical understanding. Accelerated growth, enhanced nutrient density, radiation resistance. Impressive work. Why farming? He asked, because the silence was becoming uncomfortable. Your species has the technology for easier food production. Minji shrugged. A human gesture he'd learned meant uncertainty or dismissal. Someone has to grow stuff for the outer colonies. And I like it out here. It's quiet. Usually, until pirates attack. Yeah, that's new. She moved to one of the plant rows, checking leaves with practiced efficiency despite the chaos outside. How does someone become a space pirate anyway? Is there a school? Economic necessity, mostly. The Valkith worlds have limited resources. Raiding is traditional. So is farming. Doesn't mean it pays well. Minji pulled a device from her belt scanner of some kind and took readings from a plant. You know your crew is probably going to leave without you, right? Korvax checked his comm. She was right. The retreat signal had been broadcast 3 minutes ago. His ship was already leaving orbit. That's inconvenient, he said. Very. Minji looked at him, really looked at him. What's going to happen to you? I'll likely be captured by your authorities. Tried under human law. Imprisoned. He tried to sound unbothered by this. Failed. Or killed. If your people prefer summary execution, we're not really into killing prisoners. Minji frowned. Mostly because we don't have anywhere to keep them. New Hedong has 1 detention cell. And it's usually occupied by whoever got drunk at the orbital bar on Saturday night. Your civilization is very confusing. You're not wrong. The chaos outside was fading. Korvax could hear human voices now, coordinating. His sensory pits picked up the approach of several individuals. Armed, probably. Minji must have heard them too. She made a decision. He could see it in the way her shoulders straightened. Come on. Where? Storm shelter. It's not technically hiding a fugitive if I'm just taking shelter from the raid, right? Korvax followed her because the alternative was capture, and because something about this small human intrigued him. She led him through the greenhouse to a back exit, then across open ground to a door set into the hillside. The shelter was simple reinforced walls, basic supplies, air filtration. They descended into darkness. 3 days in a storm shelter with an alien pirate was not how Minji had planned to spend her week. They'd gone to ground during the chaos. And by the time it was safe to emerge, someone had noticed that one raider hadn't made it back to his ship. The colony security, all 15 members, were conducting searches. Minji had seen the drones from the shelter's periscope port, sweeping the area with thermal sensors. The shelter was stocked for 4 people for 2 weeks. Plenty of supplies. What it lacked was space. Korvax was large, not as tall as a human, but broader, with 4 arms that were always in motion, even when he tried to be still. They'd established territories. Minji took the sleeping platform on the left. Korvax took the right. The middle area was neutral ground. Your people take rejection of hospitality very seriously, Korvax observed on day 2, watching through the periscope as another search team passed overhead. That's not what this is. Minji was eating a ration bar that tasted like cardboard and regret. This is me being an idiot. Why? Because helping you is probably treason or something. Yet you're doing it anyway. She didn't have a good answer for that. Korvax had tried to rob her colony. His crew had damaged buildings, destroyed equipment, and scared everyone badly enough that half the kids were having nightmares. She should turn him in. Should have turned him in immediately. But he'd looked so confused when she called the excavators weaponized. And he'd apologized for invading, which struck her as weirdly polite for a pirate. Also, and she wouldn't admit this under oath, she was lonely. New Hadong had 847 people, and Minji had carefully avoided forming close relationships with any of them. Too much vulnerability. Too much risk of getting hurt. But here in this shelter was someone who was literally from a different world. She felt comfortable. "Tell me about your home," she said. Because the silence was getting heavy again. Korvax's sensory pits fluttered, his equivalent of surprise. "Why? Boredom. And you're going to be here for a while, so we might as well talk." He settled back against the wall, his lower arms folding while his upper arms gestured as he spoke. Valkith Prime is a dense world. High gravity, compressed atmosphere. Beautiful by our standard cities that grow from the bedrock itself, carved by generations of claws. But crowded. Resources strained. My clutch, my family. There are 37 of us in a dwelling meant for 12. That sounds claustrophobic. It is. It is. So we raid. It's how we survive. You could trade, Minji pointed out. Like civilized species. Trade requires having something others want. We have population and need. Not a strong bargaining position. His translator couldn't quite capture the emotion in his voice, but Minji heard it anyway. Frustration. Shame, maybe. I'm not defending what we do. Just explaining it. That's more than most people manage. They fell into a routine. Minji shared her rations with Korvax, though his digestive system struggled with human food. He told her about his homeworld, about the crew he'd lost, about the younger siblings who depended on his income. She told him about Earth, about her debt, about how she'd come to Kepler 442b to escape a life that felt too small. On day 4, Korvax asked, "Why did you help me?" Minji had been expecting the question. Still didn't have a good answer. "I don't know. Impulse? Stupidity? Those seem like insufficient reasons to commit treason." "Yeah, well, I'm bad at making good choices." "I disagree. Your choice to weaponize the excavators was tactically sound." She laughed despite herself. "That wasn't tactics. That was spite. Spite can be tactical. The search teams were getting less frequent. By day 5, Minji thought it might be safe to emerge. Kovacs's ship was long gone. The colony had returned to something like normalcy. But leaving the shelter meant decisions. What to do with Kovacs? How to explain where she'd been? I could turn myself in, Kovacs offered. Tell them you were sheltering under duress. That's actually not a terrible idea, but I don't want to. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. Kovacs's sensory pits flared, and his upper arms spread in what she'd learned was curiosity. Why not? Because this is the most interesting conversation I've had in 3 years. Because you're not actually dangerous, you're just desperate. Because she stopped, unsure how to continue. Because I'm tired of being alone, and you're the first person being whatever who's made me want to not be alone. Silence. Then, I tried to rob your colony. Yeah, and you were terrible at it. That's almost endearing. You have very strange criteria for finding things endearing. Tell me about it. Kovacs moved closer. Not threatening, just present. If I stayed, if there was a way for me to stay, would you want that? Minji's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. This was stupid, dangerous, impossible for at least 17 different reasons, starting with he's an alien and ending with also he's a criminal. Yeah, she said. I think I would. That's inconvenient. Very. His upper right hand, was it a hand? She should ask reached out slowly. Stopped just before touching her arm. A question. She closed the distance dot. His skin felt like warm stone, textured with scales finer than paper. He had too many joints, moved in ways that her brain insisted were wrong. But his touch was gentle, careful, aware of how fragile she was compared to him. This is complicated, Kovacs said. Everything's complicated. I'm a wanted criminal. I'm harboring a wanted criminal. We're both making poor choices. I have no way to leave this planet, so don't leave. He pulled back enough to look at her with all 4 of his eyes. You can't possibly be suggesting. Why not? We need workers. You need a place to stay. You're clearly terrible at piracy, so maybe try farming. I know nothing about farming. That's fine. I'm a great teacher. She was smiling now, ridiculous and reckless and more alive than she'd felt in years. Besides, you owe the colony for damages. Might as well work it off. Your authorities will never accept this. My authorities are 12 people with 1 detention cell. I think we can be persuasive. Kovacs made a sound his translator rendered as laughter. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also right. They emerged from the shelter at dawn, Kepler 442b sun rising red and enormous over the ridge. Minji had sent a message ahead vague, carefully worded, saying she'd found a solution to the remaining raider problem. The colony administrator Junho met them at the greenhouse. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd come to Kepler 442b after his wife died, looking for a place to be useful. He looked at Kovacs, looked at Minji, and sighed. This is going to be so much paperwork. He wants to claim sanctuary, Minji said quickly. Refugee status. He'll work to pay for damages. He has agricultural experience. She was lying about the last part, but momentum was important. He's a pirate. Reformed pirate. He's very reformed. Look how reformed he is. Kovacs wisely said nothing. Junho rubbed his temples. We don't have protocols for this, so we make new ones. That's the advantage of being on the frontier, right? We're flexible. We're desperate. You mean? That too. Junho studied Kovacs for a long moment. Can you lift heavy things? Yes. Are you going to try to rob us again? Absolutely not. It went very poorly last time. Can you work in 1-2G long term? My species evolved in higher gravity. This actually feels light. Junho looked at Minji. You're vouching for him. I am. If this goes badly, it's on you. I know. Another sigh. Fine. But he's working under your supervision. Any problems, any at all, and we're shipping him to the nearest Alliance outpost for trial. Clear. Clear, Minji said. Clear, Kovacs echoed. They walked back to the greenhouse together as the colony woke around them. People stared, of course they stared, but nobody tried to stop them. That was the thing about frontier settlements. They couldn't afford to be too picky about who did the work. You know this won't be easy, Kovacs said quietly. Your people will fear me. Some will hate me. Yeah, probably. And we're very different. Our biology, our cultures, our entire evolutionary histories. That's what makes it interesting. Interesting might not be enough. Minji stopped at the greenhouse door, turning to face him. Look, I'm not good at relationships. I'm not good at trusting people. I came out here specifically to avoid having to try. But if I'm going to be stuck on this rock for the next 10 years paying off my debt, I'd rather be stuck here with someone who makes me want to try. Even if trying is hard. Even if it's complicated. Kovacs' sensory pits fluttered. You're very strange. Yeah, but I'm your kind of strange. That's presumptuous. Prove me wrong. A DIDN single quotes T.6 months later. Minji was teaching Kovacs the proper way to calibrate molecular splicers when the freighter arrived. It was a standard supply run food. Equipment, mail from Earth, that was already 3 months out of date. But this freighter also carried passengers. A diplomatic envoy from the Alliance, responding to Junho's carefully worded report about their unprecedented asylum situation. The diplomat was a woman named Sarah, professional and skeptical in equal measure. She interviewed everyone, Junho, the security team, the people whose buildings had been damaged in the raid. And she interviewed Minji and Kovacs, together and separately. This is highly irregular, Sarah said after 3 days of investigation. They were in the community center, which doubled as courtroom when needed. Granting asylum to a pirate who attacked your own colony. He's paid for damages, Junho pointed out. Worked harder than half our regular crew. No incidents. That's not the point. The precedent this sets, the precedent, Minji interrupted, is that people can change. That someone who made bad choices out of desperation can make better choices given the opportunity. Isn't that what the Alliance supposedly believes in? Sarah's expression was unreadable. And your relationship with the petitioner, that's not clouding your judgment. Oh, it's definitely clouding my judgment. But that doesn't make me wrong. Kovacs, sitting beside her, radiated tension. His lower arms were clenched, upper arms carefully neutral. They talked about this possibility that the Alliance would reject his asylum claim, would take him away for trial. They'd agreed that if it happened, they'd accept it. Minji was discovering she was very bad at accepting things. Sarah consulted her tablet, made some notes. The Alliance has protocols for this. Rehabilitation programs, monitoring, restrictions on movement. It would mean you couldn't leave this colony for at least 5 years, Mr. Kovacs. Possibly longer. I understand. And you'd be registered. Any violation of colony law, any indication you're a security risk, and the asylum is revoked immediately. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't a game. This is your life. Your freedom. Are you sure this is what you want? Kovacs' upper right hand found Minji's. A gesture they'd developed over months of working side by side, learning each other's boundaries and needs. I'm sure. Sarah looked at them for a long moment. Then she smiled just slightly, but it was there. Against my better judgment, I'm recommending approval. Conditional asylum, 5-year review period. Try not to make me regret this. The colony celebrated that night. Someone broke out homebrewed alcohol that tasted like cleaning solution, but burned pleasantly going down. The orbital bar, which wasn't orbital at all, just aspirational, was crowded and loud. Minji and Korvax escaped to the greenhouse after an hour. Too many people, too many questions, too much attention. They sat among the plants, under the amber sky, and breathed. 5 years, Korvax said. That's a long time. It'll go fast. Trust me, agricultural work is great at making time disappear. And after 5 years, we figure it out together. He turned to look at her, all 4 eyes reflecting the grow lights. You're very optimistic for someone who claims to be bad at relationships. Maybe you bring it out in me. Or maybe you were always capable of it and just needed a reason. Minji considered this. That's possible. Though if someone had told me 6 months ago that an alien pirate raid would be the best thing to happen to me, I'd have checked them for head trauma. Life is unpredictable. Yeah, she leaned against him, fitting herself into the space beside his thorax. He was warm and solid and smelled like the mineral-rich soil they'd been working with all day. But unpredictable isn't always bad. Outside, Kepler 442b's first moon was rising, a captured asteroid that the colonists had named Hope for no reason Minji had ever understood. But watching it arc across the sky, sitting here with Korvax, she thought maybe she understood it now. Hope was what you did when nothing made sense. When the logical choice was to give up, but something stubborn inside you refused. When you looked at someone who should have been your enemy and saw possibility instead. When you turned excavators into weapons and called it spite, not heroism. When you hid a pirate in your storm shelter and called it compassion, not treason. When you planted seeds in alien soil and trusted they would grow. Hey, she said, tomorrow we need to check the irrigation lines in Sector 7. The pressure readings have been weird. That's not romantic. Romance is overrated. I'll take functional infrastructure. Kovacs's laughter was getting better, less chitter and more genuine sound. You're impossible. Yeah, but I'm your kind of impossible. That's still presumptuous. Prove me wrong. He didn't. He never did. And somehow, against all reasonable expectations, they made it work. This human woman who was bad at relationships and this alien pirate who was bad at piracy. Building something strange and stubborn and real in the red soil of Kepler-442b. The colony grew. The plants flourished. And when other frontier settlements asked New Hadong for advice on defense systems, Minji would smile and say, invest in good agricultural equipment. You never know when you'll need it.